Truistry Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistry Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Emily Parker first noticed Daniel Reed on an ordinary autumn morning in late September when the campus of Aurora University was still waking up from its summer lull. The leaves along Elm Avenue had only just begun to blush amber and crimson, and a crisp breeze carried the faint scent of wood smoke from old stone chimneys. Emily, a senior majoring in graphic design, was running late for her first class of the day, advanced typography, and she nearly collided with him as she rounded the corner by the art building's east entrance. He looked up from his phone at the last moment, shifting a stack of sketchbooks to his other arm, and flashed her a polite half-smile. Emily caught a glimpse of dark, thoughtful eyes and a subtle dimple in his left cheek, and for a fraction of a second she forgot to breathe. She stepped back, murmured an apology, and scuttled into the lecture hall, her heart pounding harder than it ever did before a midterm. From that day on, Daniel's presence became woven into the rhythm of Emily's life. He was 2 years her senior, tall and lean with an easy confidence that made him stand out without ever trying. Rumor had it he'd transferred from a community college after acing a rigorous portfolio review. Classmates whispered about the internships he'd landed at boutique branding firms around Seattle. Yet despite his accomplishments, Daniel was dismissively humble. Whenever someone praised a sketch or lauded a project that bore his signature flourish, he would tilt his head, shrug, and say, "Thanks, but I couldn't have done it without Professor Lang's critique." Emily, by contrast, was anything but modest, at least in her own mind. She had come to Aurora with a scholarship in hand and a dream of someday opening her own design studio. She worked long hours in the computer lab, pulling all-nighters to refine logos, perfect kerning, and explore the alchemy of color theory. She spoke fervently about typography's power to convey tone, mood, and identity. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and more than once, a professor had paused mid-lecture to point her out as an example of passion in action. Despite their shared passion for the craft, Emily and Daniel had never exchanged more than polite nods and occasional comments scattered across group critiques, until one fateful semester when they found themselves assigned to the same team for Professor Lang's capstone project, a comprehensive rebranding of a local nonprofit. At their first group meeting in the old drafting wing, Emily arrived early, her laptop bag heavy with research printouts and mood board materials. Daniel slipped in behind her, exhaled a breath of welcome relief, and set his sketchbooks on the table. "Hey, Emily," he said, offering a warm smile. "I'm glad we're on the same team." "Me too," she replied, smoothing a sheet of lavender-tinged paper across a blank board. "I've been looking forward to this since I saw the syllabus." He nodded. "I hear this nonprofit is in real need of fresh visuals. The current website looks like it's stuck in 2005. Emily laughed. Understatement of the year. For the rest of that afternoon, they fell into a seamless rhythm. Daniel sketched initial logo ideas in charcoal pencil, his lines confident and fluid. Emily arranged imagery, font samples, and color swatches on a digital collage, offering constructive feedback. "I like the icon you drew here. But what if we tweaked this curve to echo the nonprofit's mission of bridging communities? That might give it more emotional resonance." Daniel's eyes lit up. "That's a great point. I hadn't thought of it that way. Let me redraw that." As the hours ticked by, they debated the merits of serif versus sans serif, discussed the psychology of color in different demographic contexts, and joked about the coffee machine's perpetual breakdown in the student lounge. Their shared laughter echoed through the draft room's tall windows, drawing curious glances from other students who had come expecting a tedious brainstorming session. By the time they wrapped up, packing their supplies as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Emily realized she wasn't checking the clock out of obligation. She was reluctant to leave. Daniel closed his sketchbook and met her gaze. I really enjoyed working with you today, he said. Me too, she breathed. In that moment, the world felt pleasantly suspended, as if nothing else mattered but the two of them, energized by creative collaboration. Over the following weeks, their partnership took on a life of its own. They set up office hours in the campus cafe every Tuesday and Thursday, commandeering a corner table cluttered with laptops and notebooks. Their inside jokes multiplied about Helvetica Gate, the time their prototypes crashed every browser except Safari, about the barista who always spelled their names wrong. Defense of their concept before the class became a shared triumph. When Emily's voice quavered under pressure, Daniel would supply the missing detail. When Daniel fumbled a statistic, Emily jumped in with the exact percentage he needed. Together, they wove a story so compelling that Professor Lang called it a masterclass in brand narrative. Sometimes, late at night, Emily would find herself scrolling through her phone, replaying snippets of their conversations, marveling at how naturally they flowed. She'd catch herself smiling at Daniel's offhand remarks, at the warmth in his eyes when he praised her typography choices, at the way he gently corrected her when she got lost in technical jargon. Her friends noticed her buoyancy and teased her mercilessly. "Okay, Emily, spill. Are you crushing on this guy?" She'd blush, brush it off, but inside, her heart trembled with an exhilarating hope. Meanwhile, Daniel experienced his own tide of emotions. He admired Emily's tireless dedication. The way she saw design as more than aesthetics, she saw it as a conduit for empathy and connection. He respected her intellect, her fierce independence, and the way she refused to settle for good enough. Watching her at work inspired him to push his own boundaries, to experiment with new media and techniques he'd always been too self-conscious to try. Late at night, he'd hover near her desk, offering to order coffee or refill her water bottle, secretly thrilled whenever she thanked him with that shy tilt of her head. Yet neither dared speak the words that hovered between them, afraid to shatter the perfect balance of their friendship. And so they stayed in the realm of shared glances across crowded lecture halls, of fingertips brushing when passing a paper prompter, of messages that remained endlessly typed but never sent. "Had so much fun today," or "can't wait to see you tomorrow." The fear of rejection loomed like a shadow, reminding them that changing the nature of their bond might cost them everything they'd built. As autumn deepened into October, the campus transformed into a riot of scarlet and gold. Emily and Daniel's capstone project moved to its final presentation stage. Professor Lang handed back their polished branding package with rare praise. "You've captured the soul of your client organization. This work belongs in a professional portfolio." Their classmates erupted in applause. Emily and Daniel exchanged a victorious high-five and a triumphant smile. Walking out of the art building, they paused beneath a towering maple whose leaves fluttered like confetti. Daniel turned to Emily, face luminous in the late afternoon light. "I have to admit something," he said softly. Emily's heart stuttered. "Yeah." He took a breath. "This project, spending all this time with you, has been the best part of my semester. You challenge me to be better, and I really like you."
Emily.
More than a teammate. A rush of warmth flooded through Emily. She felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness, but of pure relief and joy. "I like you too, Daniel," she whispered. "I've liked you for a long time." Leaves drifted down around them as if nature itself celebrated their confession. Daniel reached out, took her hand, and squeezed gently. In that electric moment, under the watchful branches of the old campus maple, two creative souls found not just a partner in design, but a partner in life, an unspoken beginning to a story that neither of them could have imagined when they bumped into each other on that brisk September morning. The first shock came via email on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Emily Parker was curled up on her twin bed, fingers dancing across her tablet as she refined the latest iteration of her senior portfolio. With only 2 weeks remaining until graduation, she should have been lost in a blissful swirl of capstone preparations, late-night design sessions, and celebratory plans. Instead, she felt the familiar pang of dread settle in her stomach as she opened the message from her mother. "Sandra Parker. Subject: urgent. Family meeting tonight. Emily, please come home after class. We need to discuss something important. Your father and I will be waiting in the living room. The terse formality of the note was unlike her mother's usual gentle tone. Emily's heart rate accelerated. She typed a quick reply, "On my way, Mom," then shoved her tablet aside, grabbed her coat, and left her apartment in the Crown Hill neighborhood with trembling steps. By early evening, she was seated on the worn sofa in the Parker family's modest living room in Greenwood. The soft glow of a single lamp illuminated her mother's drawn face and her father's troubled eyes. Tom Parker shifted uncomfortably in his armchair, while Sandra Parker sat rigidly with her hands clasped. The distant roar of traffic on 85th Street drifted through cracked windows. But neither parent spoke for several long minutes. Finally, Sandra exhaled and began, her voice unsteady. "Emily, your father and I have explored every option, but the vineyard is gone. We lost the mortgage to the bank last month." Emily's vision blurred. The Parker vineyard in Napa Valley had been in her family for generations, a source of both pride and stability. During her childhood summers, she'd run barefoot through the vines, taste-tested the slightly tart grapes straight from the trellis, and listened to her grandmother's stories of winemaking tradition. Now it was all gone, seized by the bank to satisfy a debt her parents could no longer manage. Her father leaned forward. "We considered relocation grants, debt restructuring, every possible loan. But nothing worked. The only thing left is an agreement we've been offered." "A marriage contract," Sandra whispered. "Mrs. Caldwell, you know, the philanthropist who funds the art department, offered to clear our debt in exchange for your hand in marriage to her son, Marcus." Emily's mind recoiled as though struck. Marcus Caldwell, the name that had surfaced only once or twice in conversation, a prominent real estate developer, heir to a family fortune in his late 20s, rumored to be ruthless in both business and personal dealings. His mother, Helena Caldwell, had endowed the university's new art center, and the Parkers had crossed paths with her at fundraisers. The idea that their vulnerability could be exploited in such a transactional way left Emily breathless. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You can't be serious." Sandra's eyes glistened. "We are. They've already drafted the contract. Once you sign, the debt is forgiven in full. You'll move to the Caldwell estate in the Cascades. In return, Marcus gains your status as the emerging designer for his family's charitable foundation." Emily closed her eyes, overwhelmed. She thought of her carefully arranged life, her plans to open a boutique design studio, her ambition to pursue graduate studies in New York, her tender, but unspoken, feelings for Daniel Reed. All of it felt utterly impossible now. Tom Parker reached out and gently squeezed Emily's hand. "We never wanted this, sweetheart. We explored every alternative, grants, crowdfunding, loans. Nothing worked. I'm sorry we've brought this burden on you." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She wanted to scream, to demand that they fight harder. But deep down she knew her parents had sacrificed everything for her, and she owed them the same selflessness in return. Yet the price was her freedom and, she realized with a pang, her chance at true happiness. Later that night, Emily retreated to her childhood bedroom. Its walls still adorned with framed sketches she'd drawn in middle school, evidence of her earliest creative stirrings. She cried until her cheeks were raw and her pillow damp. In the moonlight, she replayed memories of Daniel's supportive smiles, the sanctity of late-night brainstorming sessions, the electric moment beneath the campus maple when he finally confessed his feelings. All of that now seemed like a distant dream. For the next 48 hours, her life became a blur of logistical nightmares and emotional turmoil. There were phone calls with the university's financial aid office, private meetings with Helena Caldwell's legal team in a glassed-in conference room downtown, and hurried consultations with her academic advisor, who offered sympathetic but helpless encouragement. At every turn, Emily encountered one immutable fact: unless she signed the Caldwell agreement, her family would be homeless come October. On a drizzly Thursday afternoon, Emily found herself sitting across from Marcus Caldwell in his sleek office overlooking Elliott Bay. The skyline loomed behind him like a backdrop in a movie. Marcus was impeccably dressed in a navy suit. His dark hair was meticulously styled. His grin was polite but distant. He extended a silver pen toward her signature. "This agreement is standard," he said in a smooth baritone. "Once you sign, your family's debt is cleared. You relocate to Redwood Manor, the family estate. You represent the Caldwell Foundation's design initiatives. I'm told your portfolio is outstanding." Emily's hands shook as she picked up the pen. She imagined the thousands of dollars in college loans vanishing, her parents' relief when they no longer faced eviction. She thought of Daniel, sleeping peacefully at home unaware of this betrayal. She thought of the Parker vineyard, now someone else's asset. She thought of herself, willing to sacrifice everything for the people she loved. She placed pen to paper. The signature felt like a chain cinching around her heart. Marcus smiled, and for the first time his eyes held a glimmer of something genuine, perhaps respect for her courage under duress. Within days, Emily found herself packing boxes in the Parker household. The movers arrived early, loading her belongings onto a rented truck, her hand-labeled sketchbooks, her carved drafting table, even her grandmother's antique letterpress. She hugged her mother fiercely, her tears soaking Sandra's shoulder. "Mom, Dad, thank you," she whispered, voice thick with gratitude and grief. "I'll make it work." Tom and Sandra exchanged bittersweet smiles. Emily drove away that afternoon under a slate-gray sky, the Parker home receding in her rearview mirror until it was invisible. The Caldwell estate was nestled on a windswept plateau in the Cascade foothills, 70 miles northeast of Seattle. Redwood Manor overlooked a sweeping valley blanketed with pines, a private enclave visible from no passable road. As she pulled in, a pair of uniformed attendants in dark gray jackets bowed their heads. A staff gardener tended to manicured azalea beds resisting the onset of autumn's chill. Inside, the grand foyer was a cathedral of polished oak and marble. A sweeping staircase curved upward beneath an ornate chandelier. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors in gilded frames lined the walls, men and women in 19th-century attire, their steely gazes following Emily as she passed. Mrs. Helena Caldwell appeared at the top of the stairs, her floor-length velvet coat brushing the marble tiles. She descended with poise, her silver hair twisted into an elegant chignon. She extended a perfectly gloved hand. "Welcome, Miss Parker," she said, her voice a smooth alto. "I regret the circumstances under which we meet, but I trust you'll find Redwood Manor both inspiring and comfortable." She led Emily through a series of imposing rooms, an expansive library with leather-bound volumes, a formal dining hall set with sterling china, a sunlit gallery filled with original artwork. "In here," Helena said, opening double doors, "is your suite. I've arranged your studio next door. Please make yourself at home." Emily stepped into the suite, walls painted in a calming dove gray, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest canopy. An enormous four-poster bed draped in ivory linens. On a lacquered side table lay a welcome basket, fresh fruit, gourmet spreads, and an envelope containing a key and an orientation packet. Helena placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, her expression unreadable. "Your first charity gala is in 2 weeks. You'll present the new campaign design for the Caldwell Foundation. I'm confident your talent will exceed expectations." As her hostess' footsteps faded, Emily surveyed her new domain. She crossed to the windows, pressing her hand to the cool glass. The sprawling forest seemed simultaneously serene and indifferent to her plight. She had gained financial salvation for her family, but at the cost of her autonomy, her future, and, she knew, the quiet death of her dreams with Daniel. At dusk, Emily ventured into the adjoining studio, a loft-like space bathed in soft light from overhead skylights. The walls were lined with canvases, drafting tables, and a bank of computers loaded with professional-grade design software. It was an incredible opportunity, yet it felt like a gilded cage. Before unpacking, Emily sank onto a high leather stool and closed her eyes. In her mind flickered images of Aurora's maple-lined paths, the caffeine-stained tables of the campus cafe, the encouraging nods of Professor Lang. She remembered Daniel's soft laugh, the way his shoulder brushed hers when passing, how he had believed in her creativity more than she had believed in herself. A single thought crystallized in her mind. She would honor her family's sacrifice by giving this new role everything she had. She would learn to navigate the world of high society philanthropy, harness the resources of the Caldwell Foundation to elevate her craft, and, if fate allowed, find a path back to her true destiny. She would work, endure, and adapt. And one day, she hoped, she would reclaim the freedom she had traded on that stormy autumn eve. With shaking hands, Emily opened her laptop and created a new folder labeled Redemption Project. As the first word processor prompt blinked on the screen, she took a steadying breath and began to type her plan for survival, and for the day she would write her own story once more. When Emily Parker woke on her first morning at Redwood Manor, she was acutely aware of the manor's hush. The ceilings soared 20 feet above, and thick drapes muffled even the faintest sounds of birdsong beyond the window. In her childhood bedroom, a creak in the floorboards might signal her grandmother ascending the stairs. Here, perfect silence reigned, an oppressive, unfamiliar quiet that set her pulse racing. Aunt Grace, the Caldwell family steward, arrived at precisely 7 a.m. to fetch her for breakfast. Grace was a woman in her early 50s, with warm brown eyes and streaks of silver in her hair. She wore a simple navy cardigan over a patterned dress, a stark contrast to the opulent finery elsewhere in the house. When she reached Emily's suite, she rapped gently before pushing open the door and offering a reassuring smile. "Good morning, Miss Parker," she said. "Mrs. Caldwell will be at the table in 15 minutes. Emily forced a polite nod and smoothed her robe's silk lapel. Underneath, she felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, the knowledge that every move she made here was being watched, judged, measured. She carefully followed Grace down the main staircase, each footstep amplifying the house's cavernous echo. In the formal dining hall, a long mahogany table gleamed beneath a grand crystal chandelier. Silver candelabras stood at regular intervals, and china plates emblazoned with the Caldwell family crest-awaited place settings. Emily slipped into the chair at the far end, her pulse fluttering against the high-backed seat. Helena Caldwell at the table in 15 minutes. Emily forced a polite nod and smoothed her robe's silk lapel. Underneath, she felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, the knowledge that every move she made here was being watched, judged, measured. She carefully followed Grace down the main staircase, each footstep amplifying the house's cavernous echo. In the formal dining hall, a long mahogany table gleamed beneath a grand crystal chandelier. Silver candelabras stood at regular intervals, and china plates emblazoned with the Caldwell family crest-awaited place settings. Emily slipped into the chair at the far end, her pulse fluttering against the high-backed seat. Helena Caldwell arrived seconds later, her posture impeccable as always. She wore a tailored charcoal gray suit that accentuated her slender figure. Her white blonde hair was pinned back into a perfect coil. She surveyed Emily with an inscrutable expression before settling into the chair at the head of the table. Marcus entered behind her, dressed in a navy blazer and crisp white shirt. His dark hair was neatly combed, but there was evidence of last night's wine's weariness around his eyes. He offered Emily a brief nod but did not sit until Helena gestured. Silence held for a moment, then Grace scurried forward with polished silver trays, poached eggs nestled over smoked salmon, asparagus tips, and a delicate drizzle of hollandaise. Grace served each place with discreet efficiency, then withdrew. Helena picked up her fork, ate one bite, and regarded Emily coolly. "Welcome to your first meal with the Caldwell family," she said in a tone that brooked no dissent. "Your presence here will be under close scrutiny. I trust you understand the expectations." Emily swallowed. "Yes, Mrs. Caldwell." Helena nodded once, dismissively, then continued eating in silence. Across the table, Marcus tapped his knife against his plate. After a moment, he cleared his throat. Emily, he said, his tone polite but perfunctory. I hope the journey wasn't too difficult. Emily forced a small smile. Thank you. It was fine. He nodded and ate. Conversation petered out, replaced by the soft scrape of silverware. Emily felt herself shrinking under their gazes. In Seattle, her professors and classmates had valued her creativity. Here, the Caldwell household only measured her compliance. Later that morning, Grace escorted Emily to her studio. A lofty room adjacent to the billiards parlor, its north-facing windows flooding the space with cool, natural light. The walls were already mounted with bulletin boards, whiteboards, and shelves stocked with high-end art supplies. A large drafting table sat in the center, alongside a workstation computer boasting advanced rendering software. You'll find everything you need here, Grace said gently. Mrs. Caldwell expects a concept for the gala by week's end. Emily ran her fingers over the blank tabletop, inhaled the faint scent of fresh pine from the floorboards, and forced herself to nod. Thank you. I do appreciate it. As Grace departed, Emily leaned against the window ledge and closed her eyes, remembering the cafe corner table she and Daniel had claimed as their office. Here, though everything gleamed and the equipment was state-of-the-art, she felt lonelier than ever. She opened her laptop and attempted to connect to her preferred cloud storage, but the network required a custom Caldwell login, which she was still awaiting. Frustrated, she set her sketchbook aside and opened a blank document to brainstorm ideas, even as she worried about keeping pace with her new, demanding schedule. By Tuesday afternoon, Emily had barely settled into a routine. Each morning, she endured breakfast under Helena's watchful gaze. Each day, she produced sketches, digital comps, and mood boards for the upcoming autumn gala. Yet every critique felt harsher than the last. Marcus, in private reviews, would casually remark, "We need more impact," or "This color palette feels too informal for our donors." Helena would comment, "You'll want to elevate the typography. This is a major fundraiser, not a student showcase." Their approval seemed perpetually just out of reach. One afternoon, after presenting a preliminary concept, a golden leaf motif intertwined with a Caldwell crest, Emily received a curt email. Helena Caldwell. Emily, please come to my office at 5 p.m. I have feedback on your proposal. Her stomach nodded. She had anticipated a meeting to refine her work, but the brusque phrasing left her uncertain how harsh the criticism would be. At precisely 5, she found Helena's door ajar. Marcus sat inside, reviewing a printed mock-up. Helena beckoned her in without rising. "Sit," she ordered. Emily perched on the edge of a leather settee. Helena remained at her desk. Marcus leaned forward, brows furrowed. "The leaf motif is overdone," Helena said. "It looks like you borrowed from 3 other designers' portfolios. It lacks originality and sophistication." Emily's throat tightened. She felt the blood drain from her face. I was aiming for a timeless, organic feel, but I can refine it." Marcus folded his arms. "Refine it? We need something groundbreaking. Something donors haven't seen 100 times. Next time, present us with a distinct icon, no cliched shapes." Helena glared. "We're paying top dollar for excellence. This isn't a classroom exercise." Emily took a steadying breath. "Of course. I understand. I'll explore new directions. Perhaps a stylized monogram rather than a leaf." Helena's lips curved into a faint smile. "That's better. Show us your next draft tomorrow morning." Emily stood, bowed slightly, and fled the room. In the hallway's cold silence, she let tears slip down her cheeks, the first she'd shed since arriving. She was 24 years old, educated, ambitious, and yet under the Caldwell roof, she felt belittled and trapped. That evening, Emily lingered in her studio, determined to prove herself. She worked past 10, refining sketches by hand and digitizing them by midnight. The only company was a solitary desk lamp and the muffled howl of wind whipping the treetops outside. At 12:30 a.m., her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Marcus Caldwell. Emily, come to my study." "Now." She clutched her laptop, heart pounding. Dressed in a slim black sweater and tailored slacks for a polished look, she made her way along the silent corridors. At the study door, she knocked softly. A voice from within replied, "Enter." The study was dimly lit by a single lamp. Marcus sat behind a massive desk. He gestured to a chair. Emily sat, instinctively clutching her designs. He leaned back. "Your revisions are unacceptable." He tapped a printed mock-up. "This monogram is too derivative of our existing logo. We need a truly unique concept." Emily's voice trembled. "I thought." He cut her off. "You aren't thinking. You're copying. I expected better." Her cheeks burned. "I'm sorry." Marcus rose and stalked behind her chair, his presence looming. "I'm paying you handsomely to produce perfection. If you can't deliver, I'll find someone who can." Panic surged. Emily trembled. "I will deliver," she whispered. He stopped directly behind her. "See that you do," he murmured, his breath cold against her ear. "I won't tolerate failure." He turned and walked out, leaving Emily sobbing in the empty study. The next morning, Emily's eyes were red and swollen. She took her place at the head of the table for breakfast, determined to maintain composure. Helena and Marcus entered, exchanged a glance, and seated themselves. Helena's gaze flicked to Emily's face, her features softening ever so slightly. During Grace's silent service of steel-cut oats and fresh berries, Helena spoke quietly to her husband. Marcus answered with a curt nod. Helena then addressed Emily. "Your current cut and color palette had potential," she said, in a tone less icy than before. "You pulled elements from Scandinavian design. Trendy but safe. I'd like to see something more daring. Unconventional typography, unexpected color contrasts." "Understand." Emily managed a firm nod. "Absolutely. I'll push past the expected." As Helena resumed eating, Marcus simply stared straight ahead, expression inscrutable. After breakfast, Grace found Emily in the studio. She offered 2 bottles of water and a granola bar. "You worked late. Remember to take breaks," Grace said softly. "You're talented, Miss Parker. Don't let yesterday's criticism shake you." Emily blinked back tears. "Thank you, Aunt Grace." Grace patted her shoulder. "You're not alone here. If you need anything, advice, support, come to me." By midweek, Emily had discovered new creative energy. She experimented with bold, geometric patterns inspired by the intersection of light and shadow in the redwood trees on the estate grounds. She paired deep forest greens with bursts of copper and mustard yellow and reimagined the Caldwell Sea, using a calligraphic brushstroke intersected by a minimalist line, symbolizing the foundation's bridge between community and service. Her next presentation began on Friday morning. Marcus and Helena sat at the long conference table, arms crossed. Emily took a deep breath, advanced the slideshow, and unveiled her new concept. As the final slide faded, silence stretched. Then Helena leaned forward, studied the design, and exhaled. "This is unexpected," she said. "Edgy. Modern. It speaks to innovation while honoring tradition." Marcus leaned in. "The contrast between green and copper is striking. It will stand out at the gala." Helena nodded slowly. "Well done, Emily." Relief flooded Emily so intensely, she almost toppled from her chair. Her palms were damp, but her lips curved into a triumphant smile. As she gathered her materials, she felt a surge of pride, proof that her talent could transcend even the Caldwell household's demands. Over the next several days, Emily found herself settled into the meticulously demanding life of a Caldwell daughter-in-law. She enforced her own kindness, slipping a hot mug of tea to Marcus when he returned from evening meetings, quietly straightening Helena's favorite porcelain figurines after a morning of dusting, and working alongside Grace to clean stray paint splatters from the studio floor. Each gesture was measured and careful, as though she was navigating a minefield of unspoken rules. Yet the cost remained heavy. She missed her old life, advising Daniel on a color gradient, laughing as they roasted marshmallows in his backyard fire pit, and waking to crisp Seattle mornings where the only pressure was a friendly critique. Here, every smile felt forced, every compliment a reminder of the high stakes. She kept her apartment, still furnished in Crown Hill, only as a logistical necessity. At Redwood Manor, she slept on a hotel-soft mattress beneath emerald green silken sheets she barely dared touch. Despite her outward grace, the isolation gnawed at her. On one particularly frigid evening, she ventured down to the Caldwell library, hoping the tranquil hush of books might soothe her. She curled up in a leather armchair and opened her sketchbook, fingers tracing the edges of Daniel's handwritten notes of encouragement. A single page contained his plea: "Remember why you love this. Remember you deserve to be here." Her eyes stung. She closed the book and allowed herself a moment, mourning the simplicity of their partnership and missing the warmth of someone who believed in her unconditionally. At that moment, Grace appeared with a steaming cup of cocoa. She settled into a nearby armchair. "You're doing beautifully," she whispered. "But remember, grace under pressure doesn't mean you have to endure cruelty. If it ever becomes too much, you have options. Aurora would welcome you back. So would Daniel." Emily set down her cocoa and inhaled.
"Thank you," she said.
"Sometimes I forget there's another path." Grace's gentle smile conveyed unwavering support. "Your strength, your talent, deserves respect. Do not let this place dim your light." On Saturday evening, the estate's annual fall harvest gala commenced. The grand ballroom was alive with patrons in emerald gowns and burgundy tuxedos, its walls draped in velvet and live musicians playing classical strings. Emily, dressed in a sleek black sheath dress of her own design, slipped quietly into the back of the room. Her heart hammered as she watched her design: rich copper and green invitations, monogrammed napkins, a towering ribbon of copper satin cascading down the grand staircase, unfold in real life. Patrons admired the decor, a living installation of potted ferns and amber lighting, the centerpiece table shaped like an interlocking Caldwell sea. She heard murmurs: "Stunning concept, bold, yet elegant, exactly what this foundation needed." Grace slipped beside her. "They love it," she said softly. Emily exhaled, tears threatening, but managed a grateful smile. Nearby, Helena approached, flanked by trustees. She gave Emily a slight nod of approval. Marcus stood to one side, arms folded, his expression unreadable. But when their eyes met, he offered a quick, almost shy, nod, as if acknowledging her triumph. In that moment, amidst the glittering crowd and under the warm glow of crystal candelabras, Emily felt a surge of quiet triumph. The ordeal of the Caldwell household had tested her resolve and skill, but she had prevailed. She had not only survived, she had designed her way to acceptance. Returning to her studio late that night, Emily sank onto the drafting table and stared at her reflection in the darkened window. She saw a woman transformed, honed by adversity, tempered by expectation, but still utterly herself. Somewhere deep inside, Daniel's voice buoyed her. "Remember why you love this. Remember you deserve to be here." Tomorrow, she would continue to refine, to learn, and to adapt. And maybe, one day soon, she would find a way to reclaim the life she once envisioned, one where design flourished alongside love, not under its shadow. For now, though, she was rooted to Redwood Manor, a daughter-in-law bound by obligation but armed with the knowledge that her creativity and courage could overcome even the coldest walls. When Emily slipped out of Redwood Manor that night, the air was so cold it felt like ice against her skin. A heavy snow lay on the ground, muffling her footsteps as she hurried down the winding drive. The house loomed behind her, its windows dark and forbidding, a gilded prison from which she had resolved to escape. In her arms she carried only her laptop bag, its weight a small comfort and a reminder of her purpose. She would not return until she had reclaimed her freedom. She had packed hastily. Earlier that evening, she'd spent a tense hour in the studio, erasing her best work from the drafting table and gathering a few personal items: her grandmother's pocket sketchbook, a photograph of Daniel smiling in front of the campus maple, the the thin silver necklace her father had given her on graduation day. She left behind her carefully ordered life, Helena's critiques, Marcus's cold demands, the deer antler chandelier in her bedroom, and stepped into the fierce wind that whipped across the estate grounds. Each breath she drew tasted of snow and pine, reminding her of childhood winters at her parents' home in Seattle. She recalled the crackle of firewood, the laughter of her cousins, the way her mother's voice had sounded reading bedtime stories. Here in the Cascades, all was stillness and holding one's own against the narrowing hours. She navigated by memory and faint light from the moon, guided by the gravel path that led toward the main gate. Snow fell in thick flakes, dusting her hair and eyelashes, and she brushed them away, her heart racing. She dared not pause. Every moment she lingered, she risked discovery or worse. She did not know what awaited her beyond the gate. The long road down to Seattle, the cold bench at the bus stop, Daniel's outstretched arms or worried face. She only knew that staying meant losing herself completely. At last she reached the wrought iron gate, its intricate swirls frosted over. She tugged at it. To her relief it yielded with a low groan. Below the hill, the estate's tree-lined drive stretched into darkness. She turned her back on the turrets and gables that had felt so suffocating and started downhill, her boots crunching through the snow. The wind howled as she walked, and her breath came in chattering gasps. Each step was a small miracle against the gale. She pressed deeper into her coat and thought of Daniel, his steady presence, the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the warmth of his jacket draped over her shoulders in the campus cafe. He would be waiting. Somehow she trusted that simple hope above all else. After what felt like hours, she left the estate road and shuffled onto a narrower service lane. No street lamps illuminated this stretch, and darkness enveloped her like a thick blanket. Visibility dropped to a few feet ahead, snow swirling so densely she could barely see her own gloved hands. Panic threatened to rise, but she forced it down with measured steps and steady breaths. One foot in front of the other, that was all she needed to do. She kept moving until the manor's lights were gone from sight. Then she slowed, sliding to a halt at the shoulder of the highway. The bitter wind tore at her, and she wrapped her arms around herself. Here and there, cars passed, their headlights carving bright slashes through the snow. She raised a trembling hand, catching the eye of a lone driver. He slowed slightly as he passed, but then continued on. She watched each taillight shrink into the cavern of night. When her fingers grew numb, she pulled out her phone. No signal. Not surprising. She was miles from town, buried in the mountains. She nestled it back into her coat and exhaled, forming a small cloud of steam. The silence here, beyond the shield of Redwood Manor, was absolute. No clicks of silverware, no distant music from the library, only the roaring wind. She pressed on, following the faint rumble of the highway, and eventually saw a shadowy outline, a small bus shelter, its glass walls frosted. She made her way inside, eased onto the narrow bench, and pressed her back against the cold glass. Beneath her, the metal bench bit into her legs through her slacks, but she welcomed the discomfort. It was proof she was still alive. The minutes passed, measured only by the relentless bleakness all around. She wrapped her arms tighter, attempting to ward off the cold that seeped through her coat. She pulled out her grandmother's pocket sketchbook and traced the faded lines of a drawing she'd done at age 10, a simple tree with gnarled branches. Her fingers trembled, and she closed the book. She thought of Helena Caldwell's final words, still ringing in her ears. "See that you do not disappoint us." She'd disappointed them tonight by fleeing their scrutiny. But in leaving, she also promised herself that she would not disappoint the person she truly needed to honor, herself. Snow swirled around the bus shelter in thick flurries, and Emily realized her boots were soaked through. She forced herself to stand, brushing away the sadness that threatened to overwhelm. She needed to move, to put the miles between herself and the manor, to reach the next town and find a payphone. Yes, payphones still existed in pockets of Washington state, and call her mother or Daniel. She squared her shoulders and stepped back onto the highway shoulder. A car's headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the snow like twin beacons. Emily raised her arm, thumb extended. The car slowed, tires crunching in the drift. It pulled to a stop a few feet away. The driver's window rolled down, frost gathering at the edges. A young woman in a parka leaned out, eyes wide in surprise. "Are you okay?" the woman shouted over the wind. Emily nodded, heart pounding. "I need a ride to Sedrawoolley. Please." The woman hesitated, glancing back at the passenger seat. Then she gave a quick nod. "Hop in." She opened the door, and Emily climbed in, grateful for the sudden warmth of the heater. "Thank you so much," Emily managed, teeth chattering. "No problem," the driver said, pulling back onto the road. "I saw you walking and figured it couldn't be good for you out there." Emily rested her head against the seat, letting the heat invade her bone chill. She watched the snow depart on the windshield, revealing the dark road ahead. She sank into the moment, realizing each mile carried her farther from the prison of expectations and closer to the possibility of reclaiming her life. The driver chatted as they went, introductions, small talk about the weather, local news, but Emily's thoughts were on Daniel, on home, on hope. In the soft glow of the dashboard lights, she felt tears of relief mixed with the last vestiges of fear. She had fled Redwood Manor in the night, but she was no longer Emily, the captive designer. She was Emily, the woman who chose her own destiny. And as the tires hummed over the snowy pavement, she knew that dawn was no longer a distant promise, but an approaching certainty. When the deputy's handcuffs fell from her wrists in the morning light, Emily Parker nearly steadied herself on the courtroom bench. The fluorescent overhead lights cast a harsh glare across every polished surface. The gallery's wooden pews were already half filled with onlookers, neighbors, journalists, curious visitors drawn by the unexpected scandal behind the Caldwell family name. Emily's breath came in short, controlled bursts. She was no longer the designer in a silk robe at Redwood Manor. She was a defendant in King County District Court, accused of theft and breach of contract. Daniel Reed sat in the front row of the gallery, pale and tense. His eyes met Emily's as she was escorted to the defense table, and in that moment, she felt a surge of both shame and solace. Shame for the mistakes that had brought her here. Solace in knowing he was by her side. Across from her, the Caldwell family occupied the first pew. Helena Caldwell's expression was stony. Marcus Caldwell, jaw clenched, avoided Emily's gaze. Aunt Grace sat beside them, face drained of color. Judge Summers, a compact woman with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses, called the courtroom to order. The sound of her gavel cracked through the hush. Prosecutor Harmon Rose, a slender man in his 40s with sharp features and a practiced air. He addressed the judge in a firm voice. "Your Honor, the state of Washington charges the defendant, Emily Parker, with grand larceny in the second degree, having knowingly taken assets belonging to the Caldwell Foundation under false pretenses. We intend to prove that the defendant exploited her position to remove $250,000 in cash and valuable design assets, fleeing the scene in the dead of night." Emily heard each word like a blow. Daniel reached across the table, slipping his hand over hers. She squeezed back, grateful. Defense counsel, a kindly attorney named Jonas Mitchell, stood and spoke softly. "Your Honor, M.S. Parker is a first-time offender who has already suffered great losses, personally and professionally. We will demonstrate her remorse, her cooperation with authorities, and her deep community ties that make incarceration unduly harsh." The judge nodded. "We will proceed with opening statements." Prosecutor Harmon approached the jury box. He told of Emily's rapid fall from grace, the privileged designer who fled Redwood Manor under storm-blackened skies, the woman who had betrayed the family that had given her shelter. He recounted her flight through the snow, her attempt to start fresh, then how surveillance footage and a tip from a concerned passerby led deputies to locate Emily in a Sedrawoolley motel room. Her laptop bag partially unpacked and containing bank withdrawal slips totaling exactly $250,000. He laid out the evidence, camera images of Emily removing a cash box from the studio safe, emails between Helena Caldwell and bank staff authorizing the funds, GPS data from Emily's phone as she traveled away from the estate, witness testimony from the driver who had picked her up in the storm. By the time Harmon sat down, the jury's faces were unreadable. Emily kept her gaze low, focusing on a single spot of scuffed linoleum beneath the defense table. Jonas Mitchell rose for his opening. He spoke of Emily's desperation, the crushing pressure from Helena Caldwell's exacting demands, the fear of failure and ruin that drove her to a moment of poor judgment. He described the verbal abuse Emily had endured, late-night meetings, cutting criticisms, threats to replace her, and reminded the jury that the Caldwell family had strong legal resources, that a single phone call could have settled any dispute without criminal charges. He urged the jury to consider Emily's character, a talented artist with a scholarship, a loving daughter who sacrificed her own dreams to rescue her family's vineyard, a community member with countless volunteer hours. He asked them to judge not a criminal mastermind, but a frightened young woman who committed a crime of desperation and whose contrition was profound. Testimony began with Helena Caldwell. She radiated composed authority, her silver hair immaculate. Under oath, she described her shock and sense of betrayal. "Emily Parker was like a daughter to me," Helena testified. "I provided her a home, a studio, a chance to rebuild her career. Instead, she stole significant funds. This betrayed our trust on every level." Helena's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. When asked if she had absolved Emily of the family's debt, she paused. "I did, in the belief that she would honor her obligations. I hoped she would repay our kindness with loyalty." On cross-examination, Jonas Mitchell produced the Caldwell emails, requests from Helena for more designs, expressions of disappointment when each draft fell short. He asked if Helena remembered threatening Emily with contract termination. She stammered, then admitted, "I said I could replace her if she did not meet the foundation's standards." Jonas pressed on. "Would you agree her words, given after midnight meetings and harsh criticisms, could have been interpreted as coercive?" Helena bristled, but conceded, "Perhaps in retrospect my tone was firm." Marcus testified next. He spoke less, but the jury watched him closely as he described finding the studio safe empty, discovering the missing bank withdrawal slips, and realizing the betrayal. When asked if familial affection remained, Marcus looked at Emily and said, "I once thought of her as family. I no longer trust her." His words stung like a frostbite. Then the defense presented a different side. Aunt Grace took the stand. Her gentle voice carried in the still courtroom as she recounted Emily's late-night tears in the library. The whispered plea for help, the compassion Emily had shown to the Caldwell children at holidays, the countless meals she prepared for the household staff. "She came to us with gratitude," Grace said, "not with ill intent." On cross-examination, Prosecutor Harmon noted Grace's decades-long loyalty to the family and wealth of personal bias, but Grace remained steadfast, insisting Emily's error was born of panic, not greed. Emily herself took the stand later that afternoon. Her voice trembled as she began, "I accept full responsibility for my actions. I panicked. I felt I had no options left. I was ashamed to ask for help after everything Mrs. Caldwell and Mr. Caldwell did for me." She described the mounting pressure of daily critiques, the terror of disappointing the family that had rescued her from financial ruin, the voice that told her a single mistake would obliterate her career. With tears streaming, she explained how she never intended to keep the money. She planned to return it once she felt safe enough to ask for a different resolution. "I know I betrayed your trust," she said, addressing the Caldwell family, "and I am truly sorry." The judge called a brief recess. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Emily collapsed against the wall, Daniel's arms around her as they held each other. "I love you," he murmured. "No matter what happens, I believe in you." In the afternoon session, testimony concluded with expert witnesses on Emily's character, a psychology professor who spoke of stress-induced decisions under duress, and a community leader attesting to Emily's years of volunteer work. Finally, the Caldwell family's bank manager testified about account activity, the rapid withdrawal of funds, secured under business accounts with high authorization thresholds, markers of a deliberate act, not a mistaken transfer. Closing arguments commenced. Prosecutor Harmon painted Emily as opportunistic, exploiting trust for personal gain. This was not a desperate theft of meager sums, he said. This was a calculated removal of $250,000. The jury must send a message that such betrayal is met with justice. Jonas Mitchell, in his rebuttal, reminded the jury that behind every action was a human being susceptible to fear. Emily Parker's worst decision came at a moment of vulnerability, he said. Punishing her too harshly serves no one, only tears apart a life that can still contribute meaningfully to society. Mercy here is not weakness, it is a recognition of shared humanity. As the jury retired to deliberate, the Caldwell family rose quietly and left. Emily watched them go, feeling the weight of their disappointment, but also a strange, cautious hope. After what felt like an eternity, the jury returned. Judge Summers read the verdict. Guilty of second-degree grand larceny, but with strong mitigating factors. She announced a reduced sentence, 18 months of community supervision, restitution of the stolen funds over a 3-year repayment plan, and a requirement to perform 200 hours of community service designing nonprofit materials.
No incarceración.
A ripple passed through the courtroom. Emily's knees gave way, and Daniel caught her. In the Caldwell pew, Helena's face was inscrutable. Marcus leaned forward, jaw clenched. Grace wept silently. The sentence was a profound act of mercy, a recognition that Emily's remorse and potential outweighed her mistake. As the judge dismissed the court, Emily stepped forward. She approached the Caldwell family pew and turned to face them. Helena's expression softened, just a flicker. Emily spoke, voice unwavering. I am grateful for this chance to make amends. I will work to earn back your trust and restore my integrity. Helena rose, meeting Emily's gaze. For a heartbeat, the centuries of Caldwell expectation and Emily's desperation hung between them. Then Helena nodded once. It was not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. The first step toward reconciliation. Outside, the winter sun glinted on the courthouse steps. Daniel took Emily's hand, and they descended together. Emily looked back at the solemn stone facade, once a symbol of her darkest hour, now a place where mercy had reshaped her path. She breathed deeply, feeling the cold air fill her lungs and the boundless possibility of what came next. The morning after her sentencing, Emily Parker woke to a pale sunrise filtering through her modest Seattle apartment window. The room felt smaller than the grand bedrooms of Redwood Manor, yet somehow infinitely more inviting. She lay for a moment, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the soft chirp of sparrows outside the sash. No gavels echo, no polished courtroom benches, just the promise of an ordinary day. She rose, drew back the curtains, and gazed at the city skyline across Elliott Bay. Ships glided along the horizon, and cranes moved like mechanical herons along the ports. The air smelled faintly of salt and pine, an invigorating reminder that she was truly home. Daniel was still asleep in the next room. His gentle breathing sounded like the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She padded across the narrow hallway and kissed his forehead. "Good morning," she whispered. He cracked one eye open.
Morning, Eminencia.
His smile was warm. "How do you feel?" She sat on the edge of the bed. Lighter. She took a deep breath. "Like I can finally breathe." He nodded and rose to pull her into a quiet embrace. Outside, the city awakened, and Emily realized that she, too, was ready to awaken to new possibilities, new responsibilities, and a new sense of self. After showering and dressing in a simple blouse and jeans, Emily joined Daniel at their small kitchen table. He'd prepared breakfast. Avocado toast topped with fresh tomatoes and 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She inhaled gratefully. As they ate, they talked about the day ahead. Emily's first community service assignment was at the Shoreline Youth Center, designing promotional flyers for after-school tutoring programs. It was scheduled for 10 a.m., and she'd need to prepare her portfolio and sketch preliminary layouts. Daniel, meanwhile, had meetings at his nonprofit job downtown.
He squeezed her hand.
"We'll make it work," he said. "We'll build our life together, piece by piece." She nodded, feeling courage gather. After weeks of fear and uncertainty, she finally had a plan, an actionable path forward. She would honor her restitution agreement, serve her community, and rebuild her reputation through honest work. And alongside that, she and Daniel would nurture their relationship, free from coercion or hidden debts. At Shoreline Youth Center, Emily was greeted by the director, Ms. Reyes, a warm woman in her 50s with bright eyes and an easy laugh. The center's walls were painted in cheerful primary colors, and children's artwork hung everywhere: finger-painted flowers, crayon rainbows, hand-drawn superheroes. It was the opposite of Redwood Manor's imposing halls, and Emily felt instantly at ease. "Welcome, Miss Parker," Ms. Reyes said. "We're grateful for your help. Our spring tutoring campaign needs fresh designs to draw in volunteers and students." She led Emily to a table strewn with art supplies, colored pencils, markers, poster boards. Emily sat and opened her sketchbook. Within minutes, children, elementary and middle school students, drifted in, eager to show her their drawings. A shy second grader named Mia held out a pastel portrait of her dog. A scrappy fifth grader, Jamal, carefully sketched a basketball and asked, "Do you think this could go on a flyer?" Emily knelt, examined his lines, and gently offered, "Absolutely. Let's add some bold colors and make it stand out." Jamal beamed. The morning passed in a flurry of creativity. Emily helped students refine their artwork, guided them on composition and lettering, and encouraged them to sign their names boldly. She watched their confidence grow as they realized their art could serve a purpose beyond the classroom. By noon, she had gathered enough student sketches and her own mock-ups to present to Ms. Reyes. A series of brightly colored posters, each featuring a volunteer and student working together, overlaid with a tagline, "Learn today, lead tomorrow." Underneath, details about free tutoring sessions, volunteer sign-ups, and contact information. Ms. Reyes beamed. "These are wonderful, Emily. The kids will feel proud to see their work on posters around town." She offered her hand. "Thank you, it's perfect." Relief and satisfaction bloomed in Emily's chest. For the first time since her ordeal began, she felt her talents used for genuine good, not just polished displays for wealthy donors. That afternoon, she walked the brisk streets of Shoreline toward a small cafe where she and Daniel had agreed to meet. They embraced outside under a cherry blossom tree beginning to bloom. The delicate pink petals seemed a metaphor for fragile new beginnings. Over lattes, they discussed their plans: Emily's schedule of community service and restitution payments, Daniel's upcoming project launch, and their shared goal of saving enough to open a joint studio space, one where they could collaborate with other emerging artists and designers. They sketched rough business plans on napkins, budget estimates, marketing ideas, and a timeline. Their energy was electric, two creative minds intertwining plans for a future built on mutual trust and shared values. They laughed, brainstormed, and toasted their lattes to our new chapter. Over the next weeks, Emily balanced her service commitments, daytime freelance design work for a local nonprofit, and making gradual restitution payments to the Caldwell Foundation. She found every returned dollar lightened her spirit. The Caldwell account manager, Ms. Patel, noticed Emily's punctual payments and sent a polite acknowledgement. "Your commitment is highly appreciated by the board." Emily folded the printed notice into her sketchbook and carried it like a talisman of redemption. Meanwhile, news had circulated quietly. A series of Caldwell-funded charity events launched under Emily's design direction had drawn record attendance. Though the family's reputation had once been tarnished by scandal, Emily's fresh, community-focused work began to recast the foundation's image. Articles in local papers praised the foundation's inspiring new direction and credited rising designer Emily Parker for her bold,
inclusive aesthetics.
One evening, Ms. Reyes invited Emily to speak at the youth center's spring fundraiser. She stood on a small stage before a crowd of parents, donors, and volunteers. She shared her story, honest, unvarnished, of how a single moment of recklessness almost destroyed her, how she'd learned that true leadership required accountability, and how creativity could heal and unify rather than divide. The audience listened raptly. When she finished, there was a moment of stillness, then applause. Children she had mentored ran to hug her. Ms. Reyes wiped tears away as she embraced Emily. That night, Emily realized the depth of her transformation. She was no longer defined by her worst mistake, but by her willingness to make amends and use her gifts for others. Spring faded into summer. Emily and Daniel moved into a bright loft near the Fremont Bridge, converting half the space into a small home office and design studio. They painted the walls a warm cream color, laid down salvaged hardwood floors, and arranged shelves of their favorite books. On opening day, they invited friends, family, and former Caldwell clients who had come to respect Emily's integrity. The space buzzed with laughter and creative energy. Emily unveiled her new studio sign, Parker and Reed Creative, a fusion of both their names and legacies. As evening drew near, Daniel surprised Emily with a small cake topped with sparklers. He pulled a velvet box from his pocket. "Emily Parker," he began, voice thick with emotion, "we've built something here together, honesty, art, community. Will you continue this journey with me? Not just as partners, but as partners for life." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver band inscribed inside, always in color. Tears sprang to Emily's eyes. She nodded, laughed through her tears, and whispered, "Yes." They embraced amid cheers. Outside, the sky glowed with sunset hues, pinks, purples, and golds, a final, splendid canvas to mark the end of one story and the vibrant dawn of another. Months later, a letter arrived from the Caldwell Foundation's board chair. Politely worded, it expressed gratitude for Emily's restitution progress, her community impact, and extended an offer. Should you ever wish to collaborate on future design initiatives, our doors remain open. Emily smiled as she read it aloud to Daniel in their sunlit kitchen. "Grace," she said, thinking of Aunt Grace's unwavering support, "comes in unexpected forms." Daniel kissed her temple. "You turned a broken trust into a bridge," he said. "Now you're free to choose where it leads." Standing by the window, Emily watched a hummingbird dart to a feeder outside their loft. She thought of how fragile life could be, how easily one moment could tip a person into turmoil or launch them toward renewal. The hummingbird hovered, then flitted away. She turned to Daniel. "Heartful. Here's to new seeds," she said softly, "and the dawns they bring." In that gentle moment, as light spilled across the hardwood floors and their laughter mingled with the city's distant hum, Emily Parker knew she had entered a true new beginning, one nurtured by compassion, accountability, and the unbreakable spark of creativity. When the city lights twinkled against the Seattle skyline through the loft's vast windows, Emily Parker and Daniel Reed stood side by side, gazing at the space they had breathed life into together. It had been more than a year since Emily's stormy flight from Redwood Manor, and every plank of reclaimed hardwood beneath their feet, every stroke of paint on the walls, bore witness to her transformation. She drew a slow breath, feeling the gentle hum of the city. Ferries crossing Elliott Bay, distant sirens, the buzz of morning commuters below. Here, in this modest loft-turned studio, she discovered a freedom she had once thought impossible. They moved from window to window, tracing the familiar outlines of landmarks. The Space Needle rising like a steel gesture at the harbor's edge, the glowing needles of ferries cutting islands of light across dark water, and the cranes at the port, industrious silhouettes against the dawn. Emily slipped her hand into Daniel's. "It feels like we're writing our own story," she said softly. He nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "This is only the beginning." Their mornings now unfolded in gentle routine rather than frantic obligation. On weekdays, Daniel left early for his nonprofit's headquarters downtown. while Emily brewed coffee and prepared drafts for Parker and Reed Creative's clients, local charities, community arts programs, and a handful of social enterprises. They had built a reputation for thoughtful, purpose-driven design, and the steady flow of projects filled their schedule without overwhelming them. Last month's campaign for a neighborhood literacy program had raised record donations, while their mural series at the community center brought children and families together in collaborative painting workshops. Every success felt like a shared triumph. Proof that Emily's creative spark could illuminate more than any gala invitation ever could. After breakfast, Emily would settle at her drafting desk, sliding her grandmother's pocket sketchbook into view alongside digital mock-ups on her monitor. She still carried that little book everywhere, its worn pages traced with youthful doodles and tender notes, a symbol of her journey from frightened newcomer to seasoned confidant of causes. On her screen hovered the current project, promotional posters for a free summer coding camp aimed at underrepresented youth. She sketched a series of simplified circuit patterns merged with smiling faces, intending to convey both technological wonder and personal empowerment. Each brushstroke, whether digital or hand-drawn, reminded her that design was more than aesthetics, it was a promise of possibility. By mid-morning, she paused to walk down to Fremont Avenue for a quick lunch with Daniel. They frequented a tiny eatery called Harbor Lights Cafe, where baristas greeted them by name and served hearty soups in artisan bowls. Over steaming bowls of tomato basil bisque, they discussed future plans. Emily's proposal to launch a Georgetown Art Center and Daniel's upcoming leadership retreat for his team. They jotted notes on napkins, floor plans sketched beside action item lists, never letting the spark of collaboration fade. Their love was a partnership of equals, fueled by creativity and grounded in mutual respect. Most afternoons, Emily mentored two interns at the studio, Sophia, a recent design graduate eager to master nonprofit branding, and Carlos, a talented illustrator looking to translate his comic art style into community engagement. She guided them through constructive critiques, taught them the art of listening to a client's deeper needs, and reminded them that empathy was the cornerstone of meaningful design. Under her supervision, they crafted eye-catching flyers for mental health workshops and interactive maps for local history tours. Watching the intern's confidence grow filled Emily with pride, echoing the encouragement she once craved in her darkest days. Evenings were reserved for personal time, simple dinners at home or quiet strolls along the Burke-Gilman Trail. They discovered hidden bookshops and tucked-away galleries, forging friendships with neighbors who became kindred spirits. Each friend they made further wove them into Seattle's creative tapestry, and Emily felt secure in her place among it. The trauma of her past no longer defined her. She had outgrown the fear and found solace in shared endeavor. On weekends, they turned to larger projects. Their most ambitious plan was the Georgetown Art Center, which had secured a refurbished warehouse space 2 blocks from the light rail. The center would host free art classes, gallery exhibitions, and open studios, all designed to foster cross-cultural dialogue in a rapidly changing neighborhood. Emily and Daniel had assembled a volunteer team, applied for grants, and rallied city council members. This Saturday, they would break ground. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she scanned the final permit documents, remembering a time when she would have fled any semblance of officialdom. Now she felt exhilarated by it, the chance to build something lasting from the ground up. Their families, once distant or worried, now shared in their excitement. Emily's parents arrived that morning, her mother's arms full of homemade pastries. Her father carrying a rusty trowel he insisted looked authentically industrial chic. They cheered as Emily and Daniel dug the first ceremonial shovelfuls of earth, smiles bright beneath wide-brimmed hats. Photos were snapped, champagne was poured, and Emily felt the warmth of acceptance wrap around her like a soft scarf. This was the truth of her second act. A life rebuilt through forgiveness, accountability, and bold new visions. Later that evening, at the small opening celebration in the partly renovated warehouse, Emily took the mic. Soft electric lights glimmered overhead, illuminating a mixed crowd of supporters. neighbors, interns, former clients, and even Helena Caldwell, who had agreed to speak after initial reluctance. Emily's voice was steady as she shared her gratitude to her husband for unwavering support, to her mentors for guiding her, to each volunteer for believing in the dream. She spoke of her stumbles, the theft, the flight through snow, the courtroom's harsh glare, but she framed them as lessons that led her here, to a community determined to transform adversity into art. When Helena stepped forward, she offered a genuine smile. "Your resilience has inspired us all," she said. "Thank you, Emily, for turning despair into hope." Their audience erupted in applause, and Emily felt tears bloom behind her eyelids. Forgiveness, she realized, was a gift they gave one another. As midnight approached, Emily and Daniel stood amid friends, their lantern-lit tables scattering shadows across fresh, concrete floors. They danced to a local band's lilting jazz, steps light with celebration. Emily's heart swelled with contentment, each laugh, each shared glance, each gesture of goodwill reaffirmed the promise of dawn after the longest night. Later, as the last guests departed and the warehouse grew quiet, Emily and Daniel lingered on the concrete floor. They leaned together, watching stray petals of confetti drifting like snowflakes. Emily reached out, tracing the outline of Daniel's hand. "We did it," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "We start fresh here," he said. "A new chapter every day." She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of sawdust and street art and possibility. Beyond the warehouse door, Georgetown's neon signs flickered to life. Inside her, a gentle dawn broke, one without fear, without regret, but filled with the bright anticipation of all the unwritten pages ahead. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistry Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.